welcome back to my channel, Susie Jane Designs. Today's video I'm super excited about. I've been planning these crafts like a lunatic. Anyway, as you can tell, I'm still a little bit under the weather, but I'm trying to power through it anyway. So, today's video is one that my children and I are extremely excited to share with you guys, because I'm sure you noticed by clicking on the thumbnail, it is Hocus Pocus themed. However, I wanted to, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Hocus Pocus decor is super expensive. It's because it's awesome, and I get it. But we wanted to recreate Hocus Pocus themed Halloween decor using items that I already had around the house. So, with that being said, please join me and my fabulous thinking crew as we do that was a chuckle from my daughter. Yes, it was. The other one's probably going to snort now, too. Anyway, if you're new to my channel, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below and the notification bell next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a new video. And there's going to be some good ones. Can't catch a break around here. There will be some good ones coming soon. Stay tuned. Without further ado, let's jump into the project.
For the first project, we're going to start out with this square picture frame from Dollar Tree and also this particle board picture frame. It's more just like a picture. Anyway, I started by, of course, removing the plastic and removing the hanger piece out of the particle board, and then also removing the flower off of the front of the picture. After I removed the contents of the picture frame and accidentally broke the glass, shame, shame, I then went ahead and pulled the little tabs off of the picture frame as well. I'm actually going to be using the back side of the frame, so I'm painting the inside black, all of the edges black, as well as the front side of the picture frame black. This first coat actually covered really well, so I didn't even need to do a second coat on these. And on the picture frame, I wasn't concerned about getting 100% full coverage. So next I'm going to be using these wood letters from Dollar Tree, and I'm spelling out the words I smell. That sounds funny. Anyway, so you will need 2 packs of the wooden letters for this. I didn't have 2 full packs, so I ended up having to use other letters and cut them to make the letters that I wanted them to be. And then I'm using 2 large popsicle sticks, and I'm cutting them down to be just smaller than the inside of the frame. Once I glued the popsicle sticks together, I gave the letters and the popsicle sticks a coat of white Waverly chalk paint. Next, I'm going to be using these little wooden witch hats from the Dollar Tree. I only used 3 of these, but they do come in a pack of 5. I am a little bit off camera right here, but basically what I'm doing is mixing my colors to come up with the color that I want. So I started by taking a crimson red chalk paint and mixing it with black to make a maroon color. After I got the first hat painted completely with that color, I added a little more black to the color to darken it up, and then I went around the edges of the hat and also where you would see creases in the hat, if it were real, so that I could add a little more definition to it. Next, I mixed ocean blue and crimson red chalk paint to get a dark purple. And then again, I added some black and went around the edges and added some detail. For the last hat, I didn't have any chalk paint in the color that I wanted, so I did use some emerald green acrylic paint, painted the hat, and then I went around the edges with a darker green color using that black paint again. Once I was happy with the definition in all 3 of these hats, I set them aside to dry to move on to the next step. Next, I took my Waverly Antique Wax and I just went around each one of the letters and distressed the edges. Next, I'm using a pencil to just sketch out the word children on top of the white popsicle sticks. Once I was happy with that, I went over it with my black paint pen. Now, to make the letters a little bit fancier, I did thicken all of the downstrokes, if that makes any sense. Once my paint pen had dried, I went over the popsicle sticks with the antique wax as well. I'm just using some material that I had on hand already. I removed these little blocks and the hanger that we took off of the frame earlier, and I painted the edges of those black. Then once I had an idea of where I wanted to put all of my letters, I hot glued the word smell together so that it would be easier to insert into the frame. I glued the I smell at the top of the frame and then the children on the bottom of the frame. I will say that this is where I messed up and I should have placed them a little bit further away from the edge, and you'll see why once we get to the end. Then I glued the hanger piece in the very middle and glued one block to each of the purple and red hats. Then I glued those hats on each side of the center block, and then I glued the green hat on top of the center block. The last step was to glue on the frame. As you can see, the frame kind of covers up the words a little bit, but I did go in and add fairy lights later on, which helped that process a little bit. So the next project, we're going to be using one of these wood houses from the dollar store. I started off by painting the outside and inside of the frame black, and this did only take one coat. I also painted one of the glass candlesticks from Dollar Tree that I had on hand already. Next, I'm going to be using this little wooden piece that came from Walmart, but I did want to show you guys that you can totally use the wood beads that come from the dollar store if you want to go that route instead. I painted the little wood piece black, and then I went back into my little wooden house and painted the entire inside white. This did take 2 coats to get completely full coverage. Then I went in with my Waverly Antique Wax and distressed all of the edges around the inside of the frame. I also had some spots that I got some white paint, and I just went back and touched those up. I laid the house on its side and glued the little wood piece in the center on the top. I found some font online that I liked, and I just used it to sketch out what I wanted the sign to say. I had found this picture on Pinterest and just used it as a guide. Once I was done with that, I filled it all in with my black paint pen. I wish I had removed the back from it because it did get a little hard to do the text near the bottom, but it worked out in the end. I do really love how this sign turned out. Next, I added some E6000 and hot glue to the top of the candlestick and then placed the house into the center. I felt like this needed a little embellishment, and I have a ton of these keys left over that were wedding favors from our wedding, so I just glued that to the frame. This next project is by far the easiest, so we're using this sign from the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to start by spraying all the glitter really well with hairspray and letting that dry. Then I'm just going to paint the center portion with 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. Once that had completely dried, I used my pencil and I found some text online that I really liked, and I just filled out the sign with "I put a spell on you." Once I was happy with the font and the layout, I went ahead and filled it in with my white chalk marker. And again, I went back over the text and thickened all of the downstrokes. Then I decided to go ahead and add a border that went all the way around the outside. I still felt like it needed something, so the last thing I did was add these little bursts on there. I don't really know what else to call them, but this project is done. For this next project, I'm using this frame that came from Dollar General just because it's what I had on hand, but you can definitely use one from Dollar Tree. They have similar ones. I just removed all of the contents, and I'm using another one of these little wooden beads and one of these small little glass jars. I guess it would actually be called a bowl, but I digress. Anyway, I went ahead and covered each one of these in some black chalk paint. On the frame, I wasn't worried about full coverage. The little bowl did take me 2 coats of the black paint to get full coverage. Next, I took this metallic silver paint and I went over just the picture frame, and again, I wasn't looking to get full coverage. Basically, my goal with this is to make it look like old age silver. To help me accomplish this, I'm going to be using my antique wax from Waverly, and then I also went back in and mixed some orange paint with my antique wax, and I'm hitting all the edges and grooves of the picture frame with that color to kind of antique it. And I made sure to do the same steps on the side of the frame. I felt like the frame was really looking pretty plain, so I took these stickers from Dollar Tree and I added one in the top, in the center, and then the same on the bottom. These are stickers, so they do have an adhesive on the back, but I wanted to make extra sure that they would stay in place. Next, I used these wood beads from Dollar Tree. I picked out a few because I wasn't sure how many I was going to use, but I did use a larger side of the darkest color. And then I painted them with the brown, a little bit of silver, and that orange paint, and kind of mixed it all together. Next, I had to figure out exactly how I wanted to put the frame together. So originally, I was going to put the largest piece of the wood piece from Walmart. I'm not sure what to call it. I was going to put that attached to the frame. Then I decided to flip it over and put the largest part attached to the upside down bowl and glue that down with E6000 and hot glue, and then I glued the frame on top of that. I did want to make sure that this would stay in place, so I added quite a bit of hot glue around the back and the front where the frame was attached, and to cover it up, I just used a gray satin ribbon and tied a bow around it, and it was a little too pretty, so I used some of my antique wax to kind of distress the bow a little bit. Then I added one of the wood beads to the top in the center. Next, I typed out the spell that Winnie uses to raise Billy from the grave in Hocus Pocus, and I picked some fonts that I liked and cut it to size and used the glass from the frame to, make sure that it was the right size. Then I took my antique wax and just distressed the paper. Then I put the glass, the paper, and the backing back into the frame. Next, I used this dark, creepy cloth from Dollar Tree, and I cut a strip of it and just hot glued it around the top and the sides of the frame. I feel like adding the creepy cloth around the edges really just gave it that extra touch that it needed, since, she is raising him from the dead. And that brings us to our last and probably most complicated project. I saw the skull at Dollar Tree, and originally I just got it because my girls liked it and I thought it would be fun to have, but then I came up with this idea. So I'm using 2 pearls from the Dollar Tree and I'm painting them with Waverly white chalk paint, and then going back over with brown acrylic paint and creating the eyes. I also added a little touch of yellow into the eyes because brown eyes are never just purely brown, at least rarely. And then I added a black pupil. Once my eyes were dry, I went ahead and hot glued them into the skull. I think it would be kind of fun to leave it like this actually, but that wasn't the point of adding eyes. Next, I'm going to take some tissue paper and Mod Podge, both of which you can get from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to start building a face. This part is a little complicated to explain, and I do keep going off camera, I'm sorry, but basically what you're doing is just tearing off chunks of tissue paper and using Mod Podge to paper mache a face. And because this is a zombie, it definitely does not have to be perfect. So I'm just using chunks and layers of tissue paper. Basically, I start by building up the eyelids and then move on to the nose, and once I get that not perfect, my daughter said it looks like Squidward's nose. Anyway, once I got the nose on, then I could move on to the lips and so on. Once I got to the lips, I then had to decide if I was going to make Billy with his mouth sewn shut or if I was going to have it open. I went ahead and went with it sewn shut, which I'm really glad I did in the long run. But then I could build up his cheekbones a little bit and try and make this look a little less like a skull. This process definitely just requires a lot of patience and a lot of Mod Podge and patience, as you can see by my children that are helping me. Anyway, I just kind of kept going, just little pieces of tissue paper and building on top of building on top of building. When you first start this process, you'll think, oh my god, this is terrible. What was I even thinking trying to do this? But if you just keep trucking along, I promise you, you will like the end result. Once I was happy with the face, I used a toothpick and my black paint pen to mark off where I was going to put the nostrils and also the puncture marks for where his lips will be sewn. Then I took my Waverly chalk paint in the color Silver Lining, which is just a light gray, and I covered the entire skull, being careful to avoid the eyes. Next, to get that deathly pallor to his skin, I mixed in a little bit of my Moss Waverly chalk paint, which is a light green color, with that Silver Lining, and I painted the entire skull with that color. Then I took some Elephant chalk paint, which is a dark gray, and I went ahead and went all around the eyes and around the bridge of the nose, under his cheekbones, along the jawline. Basically, you know, if you do makeup, I was contouring his face with some dark gray. And this is just to give his face a little more definition. So I did forget to push record when I started adding his hair. My bad. Anyway, basically all I did was use that same creepy cloth that we used in the last DIY, and I cut strips of it and I just hot glued it, similar to how you would add on a doll's hair, if you know what I mean. Once I had the basic shape of his hair, then I could go in with my hot glue gun and cut off smaller strips and just kind of add those in wherever it needed to be filled. Originally, I used my paint pen to do the stitches on his lips, but my husband and my daughter said that I could do better. So I used some threads left over from what fell off of his head while I was making his hair, and I just hot glued those in a zigzag pattern across his lips. So speaking of makeup, this really is how I got the darkness around his eyes. So I started by using a gray eyeshadow and then a black eyeshadow, and then I even went in right around the edges of his eyes with a black eyeliner and just smudged that in to get that dark, creepy appearance to his eyes. I mean, this guy's got some dark circles under his eyes after being asleep for 300 years. Next, I fluffed up his hair and got it the way that I wanted it to be placed and hairsprayed it in place. I totally forgot to mention earlier that I did add a gray ribbon around his little ponytail. And the last step to this was I didn't like how cheap and plasticky the base looked, so I did paint that with a coat of black Waverly chalk paint.
That's it for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. And like I said, stay tuned. I got some other good videos coming your way. That's it, guys. Until next time, I'll be seeing you.